Okay, thank you so much, Randy, and thank you so much to the Coalition for a National Infrastructure Bank for calling attention to this critical issue and coming up with a solution. I am so honored to be on this panel. Alfecca and I have fought the wars together for a while now, and it is so good that party officials like you, Randy, are getting involved in public policy. We need more of a nexus between those two things. And I was so delighted to learn that Professor Brands, who wrote one of my favorite biographies, The First American, about Benjamin Franklin, was coming on tonight. I guess what I'm going to do is sort of a link between our two speakers. We know we are in economic crisis at this point, but what is going to be a transformative crisis? What is going to bring things to the point where we can get serious change and serious investment in our country? Over the last 10 years or so, I think I've come up with at least 6 or 7 different emerging, potentially existential crises in this country. When I was thinking about this tonight, I realized our crumbling infrastructure is not going to be on that list because the vast majority of people, including elected officials, including public policy people, don't connect the dots between different infrastructure systems in that way. And even if they were inclined to, they don't have the knowledge to do so. For example, people understand our roads are in bad shape because they drive them every day. But as long as their dams work and as long as their power grid works and as long as their sewers work, it's out of sight, out of mind for them. So the crises we're talking about have to be somewhat different, but at least 3 of them that I could think of have a huge infrastructure component. One is the affordability crisis, which we are in right now, and the evidence for which Alfecca basically laid out for us. It's the kind of issue that is not only transformative, I mean, it has caused many a revolution on this world. But there are non-infrastructure components to it, much of which Alfecca laid out, but there are infrastructure components as well. One of which is housing. Housing is the biggest expense in most families' budgets. According to a sampling of studies I pulled together, the housing shortage in this country is probably somewhere around 5 million units. The bulk of that shortage is for people of low incomes, modest incomes, people who cannot afford to work as well. The cost of siting and building 5 million new homes is going to be over $1 trillion. Another infrastructure component of the affordability crisis is the rising cost of utilities. In New York State, out of a state of 19 million people, 1.3 million ratepayers are behind in their utility bills now, and there are big increases coming. National Grid, for example, is going to be charging 20% more for electricity and 27% more for gas over the next 3 years. Con Edison, which provides electricity and gas to nearly half the state, is asking for a 13.3% increase in gas and an 11.4% increase in electricity just for next year. They say that this is part of a need to repair distribution infrastructure and move toward a carbon-free system. A third infrastructure-related component is supply chain. We've seen what gaps in the supply chain could do to prices during COVID. Just imagine what happens if we have major breaches in our road infrastructure, major breaches in our water system. Water is an essential ingredient in both agriculture and in just about any industrial process. We need to consider what this can do to consumer prices. The second one is climate resiliency. I consider this separately from climate change and energy transition because the number of natural disasters that we are beginning to get is going to cause the kind of violence to people's everyday lives that they just won't ignore it anymore. For example, one study concluded that 100-year storms are now really 25-year storms. In coastal North Carolina, there have been 900-year storms in the past 25 years. And we've seen in the news the forest fires in Canada happening every year, the wiping out of entire communities in California. You can see the financial havoc in the precipitous rise in homeowners insurance in Florida, which is, their policies have been rising, the premiums have been rising an average of 40% in the past 3 years. In California, there are people whose homeowners policies have doubled and tripled in cost because of the wildfires. Now, inflation and other factors play a role, but it is no coincidence that the biggest crises in homeowner insurance rates in this country are taking place in Florida and in California. With these disasters comes the need to rebuild housing and infrastructure systems. And we even see it in places other than California or in Florida. I'm inland New York State, one of the places that people kind of think of as a safe one. But we're already seeing in Westchester County the kind of doors used to create safe spaces on warships and submarines are now being used to keep water out of wastewater treatment plants and American Legion posts. The growing need to move boilers and other building infrastructure out of the basements is becoming really acute because there are people whose basements flood on a seasonal basis at this point. And we also have roads being washed out in Rockland County on a regular basis as well. We're going to have to figure out how to reprioritize where to move roads, where to move people, and what we can do to make existing facilities more resilient. And then, of course, we are going to have to make changes in how we fuel our societies and economies. Humankind has gone through these before, but you know what? We're going to have to do it at a much faster rate at this point. Carbon-free power generation, changes to our electrical distribution system so that power can be moved from new locations where it's generated. EV charging stations, retrofitting of old buildings where possible, and new construction where it's not. We will be able to create the greatest economic expansion in a century if we're willing to make the investments. The National Infrastructure Bank gives us a mechanism for providing a large chunk of the funding that we are going to need to make all these things happen, to solve all of these crises. That is why I am so thrilled to be a supporter of the Coalition for a National Infrastructure Bank. And I'm proud to join so many office holders in this country supporting it as well. Thank you.